should have in front of you.
I did a nice thing. It's like,
I didn't think that's not that we have to be real official or anything like that, but are any additions or corrections you'd like me to make to the minutes? And then if we could take a look at the agenda then, please, as to what we're going to take with it today. And then we can also look at what we're going to do on May 13th. And plans for today include going over some of the things we talked about last meeting, and then try to focus on communicating what we came up with to our constituents, parents, coaches, community, faculty. So that's where we're going to go from here. And in the back of your minds, I'd like you to keep in mind that we are charged with making a recommendation to the Board of Education. The first one, I think that has to be done, and this is my perspective, is establish a committee to update policy 6100.2 in the handbook for the reason that it's not updated in regards to specific positions that currently exist on the Hartford athletic staff. There are terms that are used that I don't think are quite accurate now. So I think we should update it just so it reflects what the current administration is and what the responsibilities are that reflect what the current standing is. I also should add that Mr. Alvanos, I understand, has a family health issue where he is in the Philadelphia area, and Mr. Knoll has a conflicting commitment. So I wanted to mention that as well. Okay?
On the committee, I think we just recommended to the board to have the policy committee take a look at it. We already have a policy committee in place.
Okay,
I
so
don't think
make
there's a
that
need to make
recommendation.
another committee to look at this.
Well, the handbook would go through, well, I think it's through the full board. So technically,
Well, you have a, yeah.
there is a policy committee, yes.
Okay, so they should make the recommendation to the policy committee. Okay, so I'll adjust that then. So recommendation number one, to the policy committee. Would it be appropriate for the policy committee to also look at the coach's handbook, or that's not, the board just deals with policy?
Don't think so.
Yeah, but just
I
at least
think much of
policy.
the handbook flows from the policy.
Right. Okay, so we'll start with there. Okay? Good? Okay. Second. We looked at a number of things before, and I should mention a phobia I have is misspelling something when I'm writing in public. So I think as a teacher, what I used to do was scribbled it so you couldn't tell if I misspelled it or not. You know, that's, but you know, because I don't have a spell check right here. So if somebody sees me spell something wrong, you know, help me there. But boy, you know, looking phobia about that. The other thing I'd like to mention is this. I love baseball history. Absolutely love baseball history. I love the fact. I hope everybody's seen the movie 42. If you haven't, you've got to see it. It is terrific. And I can remember sitting in math class around the corner there and seeing Jackie Robinson get out of Mr. Perry's car on March 19th, 1968. I thought he was a king, getting out to make a presentation. So I've loved baseball history from that perspective. And then I thought today, just to start off our meeting, is another baseball player that I really, really admire. I don't think anybody in the room has heard of him. His name is Ted Lewis. He's a Welshman who immigrated to Utica area right after right after the Civil War with his family. And he actually, somebody from Utica, pitched the first shutout in Red Sox history. Great pitcher, but he quit baseball to become a college professor at, he was at Harvard, he was at Columbia, then went on to become president of the University of Massachusetts. He made the first public reading of an unknown poet at the time in 1914, a gentleman by the name of Robert Frost. First time Robert Frost's poetry was read in public was the baseball field at the University of New Hampshire is named after Ted Lewis because he became president there. But I really liked in reading about him how he always started a meeting when there might have been some issues that people were dealing with when they came into his office. And he always started by, how are we going to make this better? And anybody that came in, they had to be committed to, how are we going to make this situation better? Well, what we have to do with New Hartford Athletics is be committed to not tearing it down, not, we've got to make things better. We've got to make things better. And without getting into some of the details of some of the things I found that happened in the last week, we've got to make things better for people here because our children deserve it. Our children absolutely deserve it. So how are we going to make things better? Well, what we're going to do today to start off is, last meeting we talked about attributes of a coach. We talked about, are we looking for a future that is different than the present? And are we what knowledge do we want our parents to possess when they are when they're talking to their children? So those are some of the things that we talked about last meeting. Why don't we just kind of summarize these, and then we'll get into what we're supposed to do today, and that is look into communication. So if you can help me out here, what are some of the attributes, and we don't talk about personalities here, personnel, just general attributes of coaches that we're looking for here. Go ahead.
Integrity.
Okay.
Knowledge of the subject area.
Fair and consistent.
Ability to instruct in the area of expertise.
And it's a little different than Paul's. Knowledge of the sport, but then you also have to be able to get it across.
Right.
Okay. Good. And I think they should be distinguished from each other.
Caring about players,
Hearing.
student athletes.
Attention to individual.
Okay. Mr. Redmond, sorry, I'm writing behind you.
No, that's fine.
But I'm still writing what we have.
I'll stand up. Obscure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, pretty good start. In fact, I think we have consensus that this is what we're looking for in our coaches. And if we can get to these, we're doing pretty well. We're doing pretty well. Okay, a little more challenging. Are we looking for a future that is different than the present? Well, we always are. We always are. And my bias is that of the 104 schools in Section 3, they look at New Hartford as the elite, as something to strive for, and to have a program like New Hartford's. But New Hartford's not satisfied. New Hartford wants to become better, which is terrific. You can't rest on your laurels. So, what are some of the things we're looking for that is different?
Maybe methods of analyzing results, and I'm not just talking wins or losses.
Mhm.
You know, student motivation, accomplishments for students. So, methods of analysis.
Okay.
Methods,
Do we want to say evaluation or analysis? We want to say-
evaluation is fine.
Okay.
No,
I don't wanna put
that's what
words
I
in
was
your
getting
mouth.
at. Yeah.
Okay. And what do we evaluate?
Consistency.
Okay, all the things that we said before.
Mhm.
Consistency.
I would say student outcomes, but again, not just wins or losses. You know, how are they developing? How are they maturing socially, emotionally, as
Okay.
well as competitive?
All the values that we're trying to instill in sports. Okay, good. So student outcomes, good.
Okay.
So what we're looking for is a way to evaluate, so we can see if we're doing what we say we're supposed to be doing, and are we going to be able to move forward with it as well?
Did you want to say something, Jamie?
Well, I think you sort of summed it up, that we should be very clear that we want to evaluate and assure that the coaches that we've selected are meeting the criteria and living up to the expectations or the guidelines so established.
Okay?
Well, that was one of the things I thought we discussed when we discussed the mission statement, which was that, how can you evaluate if you have no articulated, a sense of what it is you want? And so, I think it might have been Pete who said maybe there should be 3 mission statements, a modified, a junior varsity and a varsity. But it seems to me that, I know consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds, but the concept that we have an idea of what we want to accomplish at the junior high school and in the junior varsity program and in the varsity programs, as a general principle of accomplishment. In other words, maybe, not dictating it, but maybe it's instruction at the first 2 levels and then higher levels of competition, whatever that is. But it seems to me that, in fairness to our coaches,
Right.
they need to know what it is that the school wants them to accomplish with their charges
Right.
in these afternoons.
And they're different. We have 3 different
I
levels.
would
But
think.
I brought that up, and the vision statement for the district, what I mentioned would be the same. But then I mentioned guidelines for each individual level, that's called vision statements or visions.
That doesn't sound like me, but I'll go with guidelines.
Guidelines, whatever, so that you have one mission statement for athletics overall for the district, and then possibly have guidelines for each junior high, modified, JV and varsity.
So, okay, let me finish this thought. Our coaches, aware of and then fulfilling the mission, okay?
I think it comes down to expectations. I think that we need to be clear about articulating our expectations.
That's a much better way of saying it.
Both
Okay.
to our coaches and to our athletes and parents, and then consistently holding everybody involved to those standards. and
Okay.
expectations.
Articulate, and then, how can I say in regards to holding them to the,
I think it's articulating and then holding.
and then
accountability.
Accountability.
okay,
It's a sword.
okay, and then 3 sets of guidelines.
It's not really, yeah. I think it's just what you're trying to achieve, your objectives at each level, that rather than, a guideline, I feel like, is about behavior as opposed to
Okay.
what you're trying to accomplish in each of
Measurable
those levels
goal.
is different. You know, so.
3 sets of goals, outcomes.
Outcomes.
I would
That's
say
better than
objectives or outcomes,
guidelines.
yeah.
Okay.
I like objectives.
That's what I do, but you should.
You like your idea better?
I always do.
Oh,
Not always. Sometimes I like Jamie's, but.
okay, okay. Okay, so this is what we're trying to do to make our future better. All right? Consistent evaluation and articulate what we're looking for with our coaching staff and make them accountable. Okay?
I think that's very important as far as like the induction, communicating their expectations, objectives, and outcomes for a number of reasons. But one, we have many outside coaches as well, not all just teachers with who are coaching. So in fairness to them, our new hired teachers have to go through a 3-year induction program to learn not just curriculum and knowledge, but new Hartford. So I think that's very important.
Okay.
It's important, I think, to reiterate on an annual basis that every coaching appointment is annual. We renew those coaching appointments every year for a reason. Coaching at New Hartford is a privilege, it's not a right. It doesn't, no sport belongs to any one coach. And that every year, because they're reappointed, we need to be certain, the board does, I would say, that those coaches met those expectations. That you never want there to be a sense of privilege for any one particular sport or any one particular coach where, well, we know that happens, but we don't care. That's what they do. That can't be. There must be consistency. There has to be articulated expectations that we follow up on. Nobody needs to have a sense that they own a sport or a team or.
Entitled.
Yeah, they're entitled.
Are we ready to go to number 2 then as a recommendation to the board? And maybe we'll just put this down, not, I don't know if we're quite ready yet, but for the recommendation is to have do something in addition to the evaluation system that you have.
Or strengthen the evaluation.
Okay. Strengthen.
To me, part and parcel of that is for there to be a mechanism that gets developed that enables, because this is one of the most challenging things I think as a board members, we hear so much sort of perpendicular, sort of like on the peripheral. Well, didn't you know that happened 3 weeks ago? It's like, no.
Right.
And there's a chain of command here in terms of how things get reported, and rarely do things get reported. I think, for whatever reason, I don't criticize parents that do or don't report things. I think there needs to be a mechanism in place that parents and athletes can feel comfortable with to report things that they're concerned about.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily know if that exists.
Okay. Now, I'm really worried about putting this here, though, strengthening the evaluation system, because I look at you, and I look at you, and I know what you're going through in regards to evaluation of teachers right now with the new system. And, administrators right now, and throughout New York State, it is, some principals I've met would say, one formal evaluation takes a week per teacher. And so what essentially we may be looking for is, we have to make time available, maybe professional development. How many hours of professional development have you gone through to learn how to evaluate your staff?
And we're going back tomorrow to have.
And more. It's been unbelievable what the administrators have had to go through. And what you're looking for is the same type of thing here
Yes.
for the athletic department.
Yes.
Well, I like, one of my favorite things to do is to criticize things that I don't participate in. But I do think one of the things.
What profession are you in?
But I think one of the things we have to think, I look at that, I like the language, but it occurs to me, for example, that I always go back to the kind of module concept of the way we teach. We have departments and department heads and teachers within the departments. Rather than necessarily throwing it this way and coming up with a better way to evaluate our coaches, I would think in some ways I would like to hear from the coaches how we can better enable them to accomplish what they think. I'm not out there in the afternoon with 27th and 8th graders. And so who has a better idea of what you can accomplish in that hour and a half to 2 hours? Well, it's not me, and it's some of the people at this table, but not most of us. And so I'd be intrigued I would like to see a system where the varsity coaches or the head coaches have a conversation with the people within their sport about what they would like to accomplish at each level and how that might be best done. And then report maybe back to the board or to this group, whatever the board pleasure is. But, you know, there ought to be input from the people, the boots on the ground, to best advise what is it what we need to accomplish and how can we best do that, so that the product at the end of 6 years of New Hartford Junior High and High School is the one that we think it ought to be there. And I mean, I don't really want to dictate to coaches.
No, I don't think the rules, I don't think that to me, that doesn't say dictating coaches. I mean, Dan, correct me if I'm, no, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the coaches go through an evaluation annually right now. There's some type of form. So there is an evaluation process that's taking place. Yeah, there's a meeting that takes place. So we're not adding, I don't think,
Okay.
to what exists. But I agree, and I think we talked about this sort of in another way. We're talking about consistency within each sport, that the varsity and the junior varsity modified have the same general guiding philosophy for that sport. And I think that's part of that. So maybe I think prior to, make sure that there's consistency among those levels, and then that would probably carry forward as part of that evaluation. Okay, here's the philosophy for, you know, whatever's bad things. Here's what we want to see you do. How did you meet up to that? So I think that's part of that. But there is, just because believe me, we're sensitive to the idea that you could be on it,
Sure.
that evaluation takes place. I just want to make sure that, again, for us, that it circles back around, that it's not a, you know, oh, well, things look good, okay, great, and
Right.
we just move on. It should be meaningful.
Right. And I look at this from a completely different perspective from my background is, in evaluating a coach, I'm looking for, were they cognizant of the lightning policy, the concussion policy, were they, the hydration policy? Did they follow the rules and regulations in regards to transportation home after a contest? You know, I don't think parents even, they might not even know that those things exist, but those are vital too. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing with all these types of things? You know, do they understand what the heat index is and what, you know, we're supposed to do in regards to practice? Are they familiar with any academic eligibility policies, or what are they doing in regards to that? You know, it becomes pretty intricate here, with what we're doing, okay? But let's keep this in the back of our mind, because I think right now we're ready to jump to, we're gonna skip some of the other things we did last week, because I wanna jump right now to communication, because this is, how do we communicate these things with what the mission, what we set up here, what we're trying to accomplish with the Hartford sports, how are we gonna get these things across to the different constituents?
Well, it just seems to me we have more to discuss on this key issue, key component of the whole equation before we move on. And I would have one question. That suggests that every year the coaches are up for renewal of their contract. And this is an area I'm not fully aware of, but what are the criteria that a coach or a person, an applicant has to meet in order to be considered for that position? Because I get the sense that people aren't chomping at the bit to throw their head into the ring to take over these coaching positions in New Hartford. It's not a real competitive issue, and I think some of that may be a function of it being so difficult to be considered as a coach because of criteria that don't necessarily pertain to their performance of coaching duties, but other things. And are those criteria mandated by the school district? Are they mandated by the state? Or is there any wiggle room in there that might allow a greater pool of potential candidates to be considered for that position annually?
Right. You're asking a vital question. Now, what is it, are there a lot of candidates for these positions? I would suggest, and I don't know the particular of each sport here, but I would suggest that at many of the levels, and I only know this from what other ADs are facing throughout the area, that you, in many cases, especially at the modified level, you're begging people to coach. You know, are you free? Will you please do this? Oh, I've never even played that sport. That's okay, you're teaching kids, you know, that's the situation you're in, because you need somebody that's available at a very odd hour of the day, you know, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, available on weekends and that sort of thing, so you, right there, your pool is pretty limited. And then each coach has to take 4 courses in order to coach, health sciences, you know, those are required by every, you know, health sciences, philosophy, recognition of child abuse, all those types of, so you've gotta have somebody willing to do that. And then you, have to have somebody that has the time and the interest, to be able to coach. So on many levels, it's probably a challenge. Mr. Polk, would you react to the?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I
challenge of
think for
finding people?
for the most part, the problem that I've had with getting coaches is a time factor, you know? I think, because of our facilities, number one, you can't go at the same time every day, all the time, so. You know, so I think that's a problem for people, it's just the time that they have to put into it, and, you know, to be honest, I mean, I've done it for, you know, 21 years, 22 years, so it doesn't seem to bother me, I guess, but the money you get for doing it, you know, is also a consideration for people. I don't think people necessarily coach for the money, you hear people saying that they don't do it, but I think when they look around and, you know, think about the time commitment as, you know, appropriated with what they're gonna get for it, you know, financially, sometimes it doesn't always add up. And I think there, you know, I've said as part of the study once, that there are some districts around us, you know, that pay a lot more than we do. And I think a lot of people do wanna coach here because maybe they're better teams, but, you know, that enters into it. I don't think it's anybody's first, you know, point of emphasis, but, you know, I think it gets in there. And I think people look at that when that coupled with the time you're spending doing it. So, my biggest thing is, you know, people, I think that when I look for coaches is the time factor. You know, again, if you're working till 4 or 5, it's tough for people to get out. Now, if one day your practice is from 4:30 to 6:30, another day it's 8:30 to 10, another day it's a different time, I mean, I think that now you're jumbling around that with a lot of other things, so. There definitely, I think there's a lot of people who would coach if it were, you know, kinda like youth coaching, if you could pick the day and the time you wanted to do it, and, you know, you were going once or twice a week, but when you get into an everyday thing, it's really a time factor, people more than anything. The classes you can take as you're coaching, I believe you have to have one done, you know, I grandfathered in all that, so I'm not ridiculous, but, you know, you have to have your CPR every year, you have to have your first aid whenever that comes out. So there are definitely a lot of things for the state, but I think it's a time factor more than anything.
Jamie, ask your question again, because I think we only addressed a small part of it.
No, I think that generally addressed it, you know, who is eligible, and is there any way that we can widen the pool of potential candidates for those positions? And I have one other question, and you mentioned the word professional development. No place in any of the guidebook or the policies that I see anything about coaches continuing with their professional development to gain a greater level of expertise in the sport that they're coaching. And, you know, I don't know whether it's a factor of whether they should be reimbursed for those kinds of activities, whether the athletic department should attempt to bring mentors in for positions in, say, lacrosse. You would be able to bring a lacrosse coach who could work with all of the lacrosse coaches and improve their level of expertise.
Yeah, there are terrific coaching clinics throughout New York and throughout New England. They cost money. So the district would have to be willing to commit to paying for a coach to go to Cortland, for example, for the New York State Soccer Coaches Association. I think, where's the football, Mr. Bowlby? Is that it? There's one at Turning Stone, but, you know, you probably want to take your whole staff. Baseball, there's one at Cherry Hill, New Jersey. You know, I think the real good ice hockey ones at Lake Placid.
Well, and conversely, in youth hockey years ago, and it seems to have fallen by the wayside, we used to annually bring people in, like a Phil Grady from Hamilton College, who would gladly come down and spend 2 hours giving a coaching clinic to every coach in the whole association, which was with no cost, basically. So, I mean, I think both are important and both are viable, but I didn't see anything in any of
To renew your professional
anything about professional development of coaches.
We'll put that on the back burner. But that's,
Wherever you want.
okay, but that's an important thing too, to see in regards to evaluation. Should we expect a coach, modified softball coach to go to a clinic at some point when they're, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay. We still thought we were jumping a little too quick, because one of the things we had on that we discussed before, but I thought we'd put that in the back burner unless you hear differently from this committee, is when we're looking for coaches, do we want to consider non-faculty coaches? Do we want to consider having males coach our female teams? After Title IX, it was something like, I think it was 90% of the coaches of females teams were females. In the, I think Title IX is what, maybe 40 years old now?
72.
How many?
72 it came out.
Okay, so,
You do
41
the
years
math.
old, I'm
I got the year, you got the math.
Okay, so, now, the coaches for female teams are predominantly males. I did not look into Hartford's, but I'd suggest it's probably, they're probably, at least half, if not more, of our coaches, of our female teams, and I think you have one female that's a coach of a male team. So, and then the other thing is, do we need to have coaches that have played the sport that they're coaching? So those are some things I've just jumped over, but if you want to address those now, we can do that and then get through the communication. You know, we did that, some of those committees, so why don't we just touch on that? I think that's addressing what you.
Well, it is, and I think those are important issues, and those are kind of really, I think, largely at the heart of the matter of what is going to make New Hartford athletics better. I mean, the communication certainly is important, but I think more importantly is the product that you're communicating about. And so how do we make the product as good as we can make it? And are those part of that conversation?
Okay. Well, let's then open it up then to these three areas. Do we, the first one is, do we want non-faculty coaches to be recruited to coach our athletes? And New Hartford does have quite a few now, and it's growing more and more that non-faculty members are coaches. What are some pluses and minuses of having a non-faculty member coach?
Well, can I ask one question first? Does a faculty member have an advantage in the selection process over a non-faculty member?
I've made a cursory look at the contract, and I believe, or Mr. Pope, I believe a faculty member has a priority first, if they
I
have
mean,
a
it's not a definite.
Right.
I mean, I think the language in there, I don't know exactly, but I think the biggest point of the language in there is qualified.
Right.
So I think it's
Right.
taken into account, but it doesn't mean that just because one applies, I think that's been something that's been a little hazy for people for a lot of years. You know, that either it was a definite or what, there's nothing definite about that.
I thought that it was, I thought if
I
you
thought
had
that,
two equally qualified candidates and one was faculty and one wasn't.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, you know, the point is that you're, qualified first. You know, it doesn't just mean
Yeah,
that
well-
anybody, any faculty member can apply for a position and
But
and get
assuming
it.
equal qualifications,
Yes,
the faculty.
yeah,
members
assuming
would get
equal, yes,
preference.
that's true. But, it doesn't just mean that any faculty, as far as I'm concerned, maybe, but, would, it doesn't just mean that they get it, just if they apply for it. So,
But if qualifications, I mean, is very subjective, beyond having fulfilled those 4 courses that you state, that basically makes you qualified. So those, as long as both candidates have fulfilled those 2 obligations, they're both on paper qualified. And to to me, that would suggest that it would be the board's obligation to select the faculty member first over the other person without getting too subjectively into who is going to make the better coach.
We wouldn't make that selection, that selection is made by the AD, it's not
Okay.
made by the administration. But
And
I
it's
think,
done both ways, I think, too.
Yeah,
I
and-
mean, it's been.
but I also think it has to do with qualifications. I don't necessarily know, Jamie, that what you said is completely true in that it's just those 4 classes, and once they have them, they're both qualified. I think we do look at some of those, and we'll, in the future, I think moving forward to some of those non-tangibles, where, does this person have experience, who has, I think it's a little more
How do you organize
subjective.
practice?
It is
How-
subjective,
you know,
there's no question.
Yeah, how do you organize a practice? What's your game strategy? How do you teach certain skills?
Well,
But
I
to
mean,
Dan's
perhaps
point,
we should
very
consider a
clear.
recommendation that we try and broaden the appeal of the coaching job to members out of the community outside of faculty, or candidates outside of faculty.
When you say, do you mean that we would do, I think we could do a better job of advertising those positions and
Yeah,
communicating
exactly,
availability?
communicating the availability of the positions and,
And I think you want to add, and make that position an attractive position to have.
well, I don't think there's much you're gonna do to make them more attractive, because we're not going to probably change the salary structure of coaches in New Hartford, so.
Educators don't go into education for money. They go in, are they going to be supported? Are they going to fulfill their mission of working with children? That's typically why people go into.
Well, to that point, just creating a good environment for coaches to work within,
Mhm.
I think, yes, that would be creating a better
Okay.
environment, a good work environment, whether it's
Okay.
faculty or non-faculty.
Creating an environment to attract people to coach.
Dick, I also want to add that when someone applies for a position, they're gonna go before a committee. And if it was, say, a junior high school coach, I believe Dr. Levatino or another administrator may be on the committee. A coach in that sport, probably the head coach and the athletic director, at least those 3, if not more, people will be on that committee. And they're gonna weigh all the factors, experience, the 4 classes they need and whatnot. And then they're probably gonna take a recommendation to the superintendent, talk to him first, to make sure everything's covered, so that if it is close to being a faculty member or a non-faculty member, they're not gonna be violating the contract with their recommendation. So then it might come to the board.
So is the contract a part of the teacher's,
It's negotiated.
Yes. So they may want somebody, they may want the non-faculty person, but when they take it to the superintendent who knows the contract, or may call a lawyer and say, well, you better go with the faculty member because we don't wanna violate the contract. It does come down pretty close sometimes. Then it comes to the board.
But by the time, just so everybody's clear, the board, we don't deliberate between 2 candidates. We receive a recommendation and we act upon that recommendation. The recommendation goes through the athletic director and through a committee that interviews those coaches. They evaluate a variety, it's just like a job interview, it's not like, well, your resume looks good, your resume looks good, I'll flip a coin. It's a whole host of things that work together, and it is not always close. Paul has clearly different breadth of experience in the athletic department than I do, but, I don't think by practice it goes through Bob's office. I think that is, I suppose if there was an unusual situation, it might go through Bob's office, but for the most part, it goes through the athletic department. And those recommendations come through Bob and Bob will take a look at them, but I don't know.
And that's just for the contractual reason.
Yeah, for a contractual reason, but not by right.
But do we have, does the school have a position that, because I've heard it advanced that you're better off with teachers. Because teachers are in the building with kids, and they have a sense for what these kids are like, and also what these kids are experiencing between 7:30 and 2:30. And that
They're
translates
media
to the,
resource.
and that translates to the playing field. Now, other people would say, it's immaterial, let's get the best coach, we're transferring to a different activity, let's get the best coach. I'm just wondering, does the school board have a position on whether that is?
I think the fact that it was negotiated into the contract tells you that the school board has a position, and again, it's in all things being equal, which is very hard to determine, but if you have 2 people that have similar coaching ability and they're, you know, to me qualified is just like the basement, and then you're looking at some other things, we would go with the teacher. And the fact that it's negotiated into the contract, which the board is responsible for, says that we do have a preference towards an educator for a variety of reasons. But again, that's all things being equal. Clearly, if you have a teacher who has never coached badminton before and thinks that it might be a good idea, and we have somebody who is an Olympic badminton player, we're probably gonna go with the Olympic badminton player. That's where we are. I mean, our priority is obviously safety and well-being of the kids and their progression as student athletes. And whoever best can, and within that sport, whoever best can make that, I think is what we're looking for. But again, all things being equal, negotiated in the contract, we would choose the teacher.
You know, one other thing I will say, and I don't wanna skip off your point, but it goes to where Dick wants to go. I am actually familiar with a coach who, gave up coaching because, the coach felt that, the controversies, about playing time with parents might endanger the coach's position, and coaching was not setting the table, teaching was, and, wash their hands. I do think, moving on where we are gonna go, but I think that's another thing, we have a tendency to look at this from our, viewpoint and not the coach's viewpoint, and, you know, I think coaches can, this is something I would like to get out of the athletic department, is what would be more attractive to the coaches, you know, within certain boundaries, obviously, but how do we, how do we attract and retain good coaches, considering that the financial remuneration is limited? Well, I think by giving them a place where they can do what they can do without a significant amount of interference, yeah, great.
So how that interference may affect them down the road in the classroom, possibly getting into the classroom.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why, but I think that's part of the reason why, and this is my position as a board member, our job is to put down expectations, be very specific about those expectations, to communicate them clearly, and then hire the very best person you can for the job, and let them do their job. I mean, it's certainly not in my interest for us to micromanage a coach, and things over playing time, to me, that's like, you know, sometimes it falls peanut butter side down, sometimes it falls peanut butter side up. You could coach 2-year-old soccer players, and there's always something about playing time. That to me is like, it's always gonna happen. But again, we have to communicate what our standards are, what our expectations are, what we say minimally, this is what we expect from you, and go for it. There's always gonna be some degree of subjectivity, but I just wanna make sure that there's consistency along the department at each level, and that's enforced.
I think that's a tough part though, when you talk about, I think everybody's talking about, you don't wanna necessarily talk about playing time and stuff like that, but that's what it always boils down to, whatever. And playing time becomes something else that you're doing, and it's something that you say, the way you look or something, but it's always about playing time. And I think we just answer a lot of those, spend a lot of time getting emails and answering that kind of stuff. I mean, more in the last couple of years than ever before. So, I guess to answer your question, one of those things is I don't really, I guess I wouldn't say that, I feel that we're answering too much of that stuff, because it's a constant circuitous conversation that never really goes anywhere, even if you've sent out a letter, even if you've sent out another one, even if you've sent out a policy, and, like, I'm just looking at myself, like I sent out a letter about practice, I sent out a letter about playing time, like, painstakingly look over the thing for, 2-3 hours to make sure I get all the wording right and all the stuff right, and then you send it out, and then you get a call from somebody saying, we're gonna miss practice, is that okay? Why did I send that out in the first place? I just, maybe I'm just getting older, or I'm more tired or something, but, I just feel like there's a lot more to that, and I think that's why you get people who might do it for a year or two, and then they don't wanna do it anymore, because it just does not become worth it after a while. I think that's part of it, and I think that's something we should probably discuss at some point. you know, because if I had a
None
nickel,
of it is on our,
if I had a nickel for everybody who called me and said, you know, I wasn't gonna call you, or I don't wanna be that parent, well, you are. You know, if
Except
you
for the
called
next
me
5
three or
years.
four
By the
times,
way.
you know, I mean, I don't wanna be insensitive about that either, but maybe there are questions that you can answer, but, you know, it almost seems like the more letters that you write and the more stuff you put out,
Yeah.
the more in between all those lines is questions. So, you know what I mean, I don't know, I don't necessarily know where the answer lies, that key. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it or you should, but I'm not sure where the middle is.
I think I do have the answer. Coach never addresses questions about playing time. Because the parent's not at practice. And the standard thing is, I love my mother, but I'm not gonna have her back fourth and play shortstop. You know, you play who's best. You know, you play best, you know, you go with who's best.
I think that's always the answer.
And playing, parents aren't at practice. And and you encourage the child, go talk to your coach. And the coach's response will be, you beat out him, that's how you're gonna, you show him in practice and doing these drills, you know, so
Yeah.
for
I
me,
think
it
that's the
seems
same
simple.
conversation.
My wife had the best scenario. She coached cross country and she said, I want you to have less playing time. You know, so, run faster.
It's the obligation of the district or the department to back the coaches up too.
Right, and is that happening in regards to, you know?
Cause I guess I just think that sometimes the playing time doesn't necessarily.
That should never
happen
be,
To me, but I think that turns into something, you know, so,
I know,
so if I'm
I
somebody
don't
who's
think that- I think
disgruntled
you're
about
fair me, you
kids
know.
playing time,
It's easy for me to
becomes,
say.
they have all their certifications, and I wanna check on this, and I wanna make sure their CPR is up to date, you know, something.
Right. Okay, so we've addressed the non-faculty, we've touched on it anyway. We see where the school is coming from, you're looking for qualifications first. We wanna touch on the female coaching, female coaches coaching female athletes, and then the expertise of a coach, or are we getting into too far into?
Only issue I would have
Oh, fine.
with males coaching female sports is locker room supervision or something happening, an injury, and
Mhm.
coach touching a player in some aspect, because they're injured, but you just have to watch yourself so much. It's
Mhm.
anytime a kid, he touched me, she touched me, you know,
Mhm.
today's
Yep,
mindset is,
right,
So
and we
that's
have to
the
be
only-
cognizant.
I mean, if a person, whether it's a female or a male's coach, whether they're qualified, I can believe they're qualified. And that's my one area of concern would be supervision. Whether it's locker room, halftime, you know, you're in there with 12 girls, or then you're in there with one last girl, you wanna say something to her privately,
Yeah,
and now you're alone.
in the locker, yeah. Yep.
Nobody's got eyes on you and her.
Mm-hmm, yep, right.
It's like a doctor's office, need a nurse.
Right.
Mhm.
Just to have to support that at the junior high, we're fortunate to have Coach Bowden and Coach Crew, two male teachers. Exactly, we have to have a female monitor or aide available, am I right, regularly to supervise the locker room, just for that
Mhm.
reason.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's not a matter of them obviously not going in, it's supervision.
And we haven't even touched on the issue of females need female role models in
Mhm.
regards to body image and, you know, all that, you know, we haven't even touched on that.
My point was on the third one about whether coaches have experience themselves. And I guess the question comes up if, because we talked about whether or not we'd be able to, whether there's enough qualified applicants. If you don't find a qualified applicant for a team, is there something in place for,
I'm
so
sorry.
say you needed a coach for, I don't know, for volleyball, and there was no one that applied that had any knowledge of volleyball. Is there something in place that says what you do? Like, would you, because I know that was an issue, and if we set standards saying all coaches should have this knowledge and this knowledge, but what if you don't have somebody with that knowledge for that sport? What's the next step? Do you just not have that team? Like, what's the?
Well, that's where you go to the professional development, and with the head coach, you know, you start with these skills, and I would imagine that's what you would.
Well, I'm saying like, obviously in some sports as opposed to others, you'll have more interest and there's more people with background, but there are certain sports that there's not a lot of people with knowledge in it. And if, say, the head coach retires and you have to replace them, if you can't find a replacement, I guess I'm kind of thinking like a worst case scenario type thing, what would be
Well,
the,
every school in this area has that. Where are you gonna get the modified volleyball coach? Where are you gonna get the modified lacrosse coach that's ever played lacrosse before? Bowling has always been a big issue. Is that just a supervisor, or, and you get 9 million people interested in coaching the golf team? Yes, yeah.
Well,
They don't have anything to do with
I think
kids.
that's where, what Jamie was talking about, you know, I think there's, you know, I don't know what the budget number is, but there's money for coaches to go to clinics and stuff like that. I mean, obviously in the last few years with everything being frozen or, you know, close to whatever, there hasn't been as much for that, but there's, you know, there's money there to go to a clinic and to, you know, go places you want. So I think if somebody was interested in the job, that's what you do. And if that person wanted to do that, you know, that's what you go. I mean, obviously, it's a long time ago, so I think I could say it, but I was, you know, it was my first year teaching here, and I wanted to coach track, you know, but, Mr. Alberico said that after graduating, he'd like me to coach lacrosse. Anybody to do it. You know, I assumed, you know, and I wasn't a tenured teacher and stuff, so I said I would be happy to, you know, and then I enjoyed it from there and went on to try and, you know, learn stuff about it, but I think that's good.
To go back to the original question, I think if it was on the varsity level, if we're looking for a varsity level, as was Dan's position, I think someone will be coerced to coach the varsity level, even at JV. If it's a modified level,
yeah.
you can get somebody there and train them
Mhm.
as to what's going on in the basics.
Mhm.
But I don't know if it ever happened
More
here.
turnover than modified.
You know, personally, I would say that having played a sport is not critical to being a good coach in any sport. I've seen people coach sports that they have never played and do a good job at it, but as Dan says, you have to take advantage of opportunities in professional development, or there's so much you can learn just by going on the internet, you know, I mean, you can just learn drills and fundamental concepts of almost any activity.
And that goes back to creating an environment to make the coach want to coach.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Could we kindly jump to our agenda?
Fast forward.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No.
Communication. What information should be included in the athletic department newsletter? Well, you have a newsletter in front of you. What type of information should be included in a newsletter? And then the next questions are going to be in your parent meetings, in your orientation meetings for rising seventh graders. You know, what is it that we want parents and students to know? And what do we want the community, what do we want the Board of Education to know? So let's start off with this newsletter. New Hartford is one of the few schools that does something so professional. So what are some of the things that we want in this newsletter? And as you think about that, could you please think of what we've done right here? You know, what is it we want to get across about the New Hartford Athletic Department in regards to the mission, the values, the things that we're trying to teach our children? All right?
Well, it might not be a bad idea, to Jamie's point, to have boilerplate in here about, you know, there could be potential, if you're interested in coaching any sport, please contact blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Something about that, and I don't think you can talk about the handbook without talking, the newsletter without talking about the website. But just as a parent, it constantly gets
Yeah.
lost, it'd be great if we could make sure that there are full schedules for each team, along with the directions to the various places available on the website. I know we're updating our website, but.
Right, yeah, that, when I met with Mr. Wall about this, he did want me to make sure that everybody is aware that the website is under construction.
Yeah.
Mr. Pope, do you have access to League Minder? Do the parents have access to League Minder
Yeah.
with directions to the different sites?
You know what?
The other stuff, I'm pretty sure it's TVL directions.
Yeah, I get very, you know, with the GPSs and everything now, I probably had a question about directions.
Sometimes it's
Well,
not
the
even
problem
address.
is, it's not so much the GPS,
Yeah.
is you're playing in Rome, are you going to
Exactly.
Staley, Stroud,
Yeah.
or
Franklin
Sand?
Field or
Yeah.
whatever, like I went tonight, nobody was there. Exactly.
Don't you love it?
Yeah.
I don't know if the directions are on the thing.
Sometimes there are, sometimes if you click on like the name of the place, it'll give you, if it's, like if I do it on the phone and the address is there, then you just click it and it automatically goes, but sometimes it just says Whitesboro, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That
I'm not
doesn't
from
help
here,
you.
so I don't know where anything is, but.
You know, that doesn't help you. Okay, so, with just the, you need the mundane,
Mhm.
details, directions, time of game,
The site to go to view my schedule,
okay, how do you go to, okay, and,
in addition to the hard copy. that's right there.
assistance in negotiating the website.
Mhm.
So we're talking about the website now, not the newsletter.
Well, I think we've jumped to it, so let's
It's
go-
all about, it's just
right.
communication.
Let's go back to the newsletter, because and then we'll get to the
Mr. Hart-
website, and then we'll get to parent
What
meetings.
about physical dates? I think that would be a
Oh,
good one,
geez,
because
yeah.
it always seems that there's kids that are,
Confusion or
they
when
don't
they
have
get
the,
the note in.
school
when-
offered
right?
physical dates.
Yes.
You know, you've
And
been
also
through
the
it.
forms, for the love of God, through all of the forms that are on the website.
Mhm.
So now you need the green form, the what? The green form.
Yeah, any critical date, I mean, I enjoy reading these, but really, for this one, I would rather have seen, you know, if you're gonna give me a summary of the winter sports, can I also know winter, spring tryouts, what is the spring schedule, you know,
Timeline.
But
Yeah.
right.
how do you get this out? You
Well,
can't get this out in time
Yeah,
Online.
to cover both things.
right,
You can't.
yeah, I don't know.
By the time this comes out, spring physicals are done, seasons have started.
I mean, it seems quite excellent to me for what it's intended
Yeah.
to do, to just kind of give a synopsis of what happened during the winter,
And it's important to highlight accomplishments.
and it's
Which I think is
nicely printed
Yeah.
and nicely arranged. I think the website is where you need to do all those other activities,
Sure.
because it's a more dynamic
Yeah.
platform that you can change daily, or hourly if you need to.
And I'm not quite sure that physical, the information on physicals is distributed in the schools constantly.
Well, and it scrolls, right on the page, you know, it'll say Tuesday the 30th.
Right,
you know,
but you want it out there.
It'd be nice if there was a single
One
portal,
page.
yeah, that we
Yes.
could go to.
How about an app, an iPhone app?
Maybe not for that. Show us the development.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
pretty good.
Mr. Hunt, I think it's important, whether it's newsletter or however we decide, through the web or not, to stress the importance to parents of really understanding what the athletic code means and what they're signing, and revisiting it with their children, and enforcing it, because, you know, many times that comes across our avenue in the schools, that if hypothetically the violation occurs, you know, there are consequences according to that code,
Mhm.
above and beyond school.
Right.
So, and often we hear, you know, we just simply signed it on the field and gave it back to the coach. And the coach does a great job of explaining it, whether they're sitting on the bleachers or whatever, but I'm not sure parents are thoroughly understanding it. And it's not their fault, I think we need to be communicating.
Okay, every time you,
Mhm.
okay. You know, what constitutes hazing, what's,
Right.
you know,
Process, you know, if we violate something as an athlete, we view our athletes as leaders, student leaders, so.
maybe some Q and A about some things that are pertinent to what does it take to have a male participate on a female team, a female on a male team? Just once in a while throw those, or my seventh grader, you mentioned this last time, you know, I've, an elite athlete that's in seventh grade, can they play on the varsity? What are the rules for that? What's the protocol there? So maybe a little of that, okay? So, in the newsletter and on the website, but you're bringing up a good point in regards to the, you know, timeliness, because this, I bet, takes a little while to get it published. But it is terrific that it's, you know, I thought it was terrific that it highlighted accomplishments. And my criticism of New Hartford this week is, if my school was one of the top schools in the nation, I'd have that hanging from the firehouse and every, you know, let people, what a great accomplishment that is, that New Hartford High School is one of the top high schools in the country. My goodness, that should be, I think the principal should have it tattooed tattooed on their forehead or something.
That's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Not board
Not
members.
board, no
No,
tattoos.
well, you can do the Rick Pitino thing.
Number 333.
Yeah.
that's my license.
Okay. Okay, now, let's, how about, parent meetings? What types of information, and should they be required?
I think that's a bigger question, because I think that's the first question is what about, again, you take time to organize stuff and hand out stuff and explain everything in detail and, if people aren't there, and I know everybody can't make everything all the time, but you get half the people aren't there and, usually there, a lot of times the people have questions later. So again, you're taking time out of practice or your day or whatever to go over stuff that you went over at this meeting that people wanted you to go over, but weren't there to hear.
Dan, is there a template that's given out to the coaches to start with? And then you can build on it, or,
I don't know, not that I know of.
so you do your own thing with what you're gonna cover practices and everything?
Yeah, I guess my template is I look at the one from last year and see
Right,
what.
what
See
what
what I
track
wanna
uses or
change.
swimming uses,
Yeah, no, because there's
every
other stuff
sport's
that comes up.
developing their own.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe we should develop it.
Cause honestly, I
Here's
like
the
to put
basic
time in
template,
that,
what's gonna be
because
covered, and you can add on to it.
Yeah, your sports specific things, and
I think when I got here, it was
When you hold a
one
meeting,
thing.
is it just varsity, or do you do JV and
No,
modified
we
as well?
we have both of them there, we have varsity and JV this year,
Okay.
and then, we usually do it kind of combined for a little bit, and then we'll split, for a little, for some different stuff.
How do
But,
you notify the parents?
I send a letter home with the kids, and I email them home, like a week or, this day, and there's so much going on, if you walk in here on any night, the place is always packed, and you can't believe how much is going on, so. Obviously, I guess you don't expect everyone to be there, but,
Do you require the players to be there too?
no, I don't, but I don't mind if they're there. I mean,
That
if,
varies from school to school.
that doesn't matter. But I know some schools, I think we were one of the first ones that required a parent meeting, because when I first got here, I was like, oh, I have a parent meeting, and then I thought it was great, because you can get a lot of that stuff accomplished that we're talking about right at that meeting, people go, but, I think now, I don't know, I know some schools require that you gotta be there, so these people hear it. and
your
stuff
child
like
does
that.
not play the game if you are informed at the parent meeting.
Just like 600 more phone calls for him.
And I think that's not such a bad idea, to be honest, because I think a lot of this stuff can be discussed there, back to the playing time thing, or practice stuff, and, then your expectations are there, and then you could say, well, I discussed this at the parent meeting, I'm not gonna discuss it now.
So do you, if 5 parents meet, does he have to meet with those 5 parents? He might meet with them individually. Well, how's he gonna communicate to those parents so their kids get to play?
What?
If 5 parents miss his meeting,
Oh, Mrs.
and they're not gonna play until he meets with them, and they all can't meet at the same time, that's 5 more meetings possibly
Yeah.
for the
Okay.
coach.
I don't know.
You're right, that's an issue. I just know some schools in this area
And I'm
require.
sure, can grandpa or grandma represent the parents?
Well,
Now we're gonna start
as an alternative, could
stretching
you
it out.
produce a document that goes through what you discussed at the parents' meeting and have the parents say, I have read, understand, and agree to abide by these guidelines or
Understand
of the
what the-
parents'
you know.
meeting?
Is there a parent code of conduct? Do we need the parents sign something? Because I know like in Pop Warner, we used to have parents who have to sign.
There is a spectator
They
code.
sign
that.
You
Yeah,
sign
but
it,
that's just say that the kid will do that.
But see, it gets pretty detailed, you want the parents to know what your protocol is if their child is injured. You don't want mom or dad on the field taking care of it, and
Well, I think
how,
more about, to Dan's point about the points that have been covered, to save the coaches from getting 600 phone calls about the same thing, because it does come down to, what we talked about before, making an environment where it's pleasant to coach. Not that parents make it unpleasant, but just so that you spend your time, you have 5 hours to commit to coaching that week, 5 hours are spent coaching, not 4 hours are spent fielding phone calls and an hour is spent coaching.
I'm also going back to what Dan said about the more things you put in writing, the more between the lines you have, and the more people in Mr. Rahill's profession might start finding, not him, but other people might start finding things to.
Your card.
We'll just have them call you, Pete.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, Mr. Ray,
okay.
he'll interpret it for you.
Well, let's come to
Just
some.
as a matter of pragmatism, I think that the parents' meeting should be mandatory for the coach to conduct, and that some alternative document be presented for parents who can't be there, that they understand what was presented at the parents' meeting and will abide by it, or whatever.
Okay.
Because it's just, you're always gonna have somebody who doesn't make it, and I think to impose on a coach to conduct personal parent meetings for those people that couldn't make it at that time is unreasonable. And,
Devil's advocate, I'm not going to the meeting now because I'm gonna get a letter. Right? How many people might say after the first year, if they know that, why, another night out of the house?
After the
I got
8th
it.
hockey meeting I went to, I didn't need to go. I
How many hockey meetings have you gone
But I
to?
bet you were there.
I was.
I don't think that ever change it, I think there's always gonna be, no matter what it is,
Yeah,
there's always a
and
parent
there's
that
one
don't
thing
show
that
up,
is not
there's
gonna
always
be
a
there no
parent
matter
that
what.
just penalize the kid.
But two, just going back to Paul's point, which is an excellent point about my profession. To that point, putting together something like this, and less words is, I agree with it, more words is more litigation, that's my personal idea. But to the extent you have a consistent policy, you discourage
Yes.
attacks on it, because it is consistent. And this is subjective, and you can't sue. I mean, if somebody, I would say to this board, if somebody wanted to sue with playing time, welcome them to do so. And then see how they feel about it after 3 months of legal bills and no progress. They're gonna wish someone would sue. So, that's a fool's errand, provided that this institution provides a consistent policy with regard to particular issues. You don't have to narrow it down to every single contingency. You tell the players, this is what is expected of you. And if you don't meet these, then these are the ramifications. You know, you tell the parents, I mean, again, God forgive me for extolling New Hartford Little League Baseball, but they do a good job of saying, here's what you get. And if you get this, you have no complaint. You get 2 innings and 1 at bat. We guarantee it. And you will get that every single game. But more than that, we do not promise. And we will not discuss. That's it. You got your money's worth of 2 innings and 1 at bat. You don't make it any more complicated than that. They just simply say, this is what we require of a coach. If you don't get it, you let us know and we'll fix it. But if you get that, then you got what we promised you. And I do think you can, you know, through the coaches, through the administrators, come up with a program that creates a reasonable expectation for the coaches and the players and the parents. And then you can really eliminate a lot of, you know, if you make it like the Internal Revenue Code, yeah, you're inviting disaster. But if you make it a fairly straightforward procedure that coaches can administer and the administration can back, I think, one, it makes life more pleasant, but 2, you are gonna find that you can. There's certain people you're never gonna be able to make happy, and you know, that's why people like me keep coming out of law school. But
So Dick, if your grandson got hit by a pitch or walk, that's not an official at bat, you'll have for Little Leagues to get another one?
That's in the bad. That's in the bad. Good boy. The devil's advocate.
Sometimes it's just the devil, really.
Just the devil. Okay, what we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is bring this back to how do we disseminate the consistency, the values, you know, those things to our constituents. Is this the right way to do it? It's through the website, the newsletter, the parent meetings. Is this going to get across what we're trying to get across? Essentially, this is the purpose of this whole committee. How are we going to get the values of New Hartford across, and how we're going to move forward? And getting back to the parent meeting, or disseminating this information, is this the way to do it? Through the newsletter, through the blogs? We've heard some suggestions, it just can't be, information, it's gotta be the philosophy and the mission reiterated every time. What else do we want? What else do we wanna have here?
I think we're attempting to, or you're suggesting we attempt to provide too much information and spend too much time doing it to that constituency, the parents group. And not that they're not important, but I think that, you know, we need to create an environment of competitive athletics and let the coaches do their jobs. And I don't know what more you can do beyond using a newsletter or a website and a parents' meeting to disseminate the information. That would seem to cover everything pretty well. I think the more important thing is how do you deal with the disgruntled parents, or how do you communicate individually with parents after the fact?
And I also think to Dan and to Peter's point, what aren't you gonna discuss? We just say, that is what it is, we don't talk about, we don't talk about playing time. We don't discuss that.
I mean, I'd be happy to talk about that with play,
Yeah.
you know.
That's what it's all about.
And maybe that,
Yeah.
maybe that's
Make it-
part of it,
make it
is
better.
if the communication needs to be between the athlete, short of a
Well,
tremendous problem.
that's what I think number 4, I don't wanna jump ahead, but if we talk about proper protocol, you know, I think is, I mean, maybe not necessarily, but even, you know, I've coached long-time sports now, I mean, I think it's important for those kids to learn that they have to go to the coach and ask that kind of stuff. You know, will it be uncomfortable for them? Maybe. You know, will they not wanna do it? Maybe, maybe not, but it's something they should learn. It's a good environment, it's a supportive environment. We're not gonna bite their heads off, you know, and I think there's a good thing for them to learn. So, you know, I'm not gonna talk to anybody until I, you know, talk to your child first. And I think it's been, you know, I don't know whether I've been around a long time because nobody wanted to coach anything I've been coaching, or, you know, or whatever, but I think one of the things I've always been I've tried to be far more concerned that the kids understood what I was doing, you know, and that they knew, because, you know, why I did certain things. I didn't always, you know, talk to parents about that and stuff like that, I mean, I had my parent meetings and stuff, but it's far more I've always been far more concerned that the student athlete, my players understood why I did certain things. And then, you know, again, that usually gets home to a parent, you know, and then with some of them, like with my kids, you might not be able to understand, so then I'd have to ask something because it came out weird or something, we've all been through that too, but, you know. You know, my kid said, you said, no, that wasn't right, you know, but, you know, so I mean, that's, I think, as far as protocol, I mean, that should be the first thing, you know, cause I think what you get now in emails or calls that's a little different is, you know, don't tell my child that I talked to you, or, you know, I didn't know if I wanted to call you because I don't want them to know. You know, I don't like to deal with that either, you know, I mean, you know, why, there's something missing there. You know, I think it's gotta be the player first, and then everybody should kinda know if we're having a discussion. You know?
Two things, Dan. One is, you gotta be realistic about this. You may not bite off a kid's head. There probably are coaches in this district and every other district who have at some time bitten off a kid's head, and that's why the parents are gonna be involved and wanna know, whoa, okay, the 7th, 8th grade, even if they're a junior or senior, let's say I'm the coach, my actions were inappropriate. So that does happen, and that's why there's gotta be protocol for discussions, and there've been, Beth knows this firsthand, we get phone calls about, I was gonna call the coach, but I don't want my son or daughter's playing time or anything to be affected because of the call. So they call myself, maybe Keith, maybe Tim, whatever, but there are coaches that act inappropriately in probably every district in New York State.
Well, I think that goes back to your evaluation stuff.
I agree
though.
100%.
I mean, if that's happening, then,
Well, I mean, but if
You
it
know,
happens,
yeah.
if and when it happens,
Yeah,
it's not evaluation time, it's time to go home, and now the parents can talk to their child, and now the parent wants to get involved, and rightfully so.
And I think part of it too is, you know, in those circumstances, and we absolutely get those calls. First, to your point, I think part of developing real people about athletes is self-advocacy. That's one of the most important things that they can learn next to resiliency, is being able to say, hey, this happened, why, I don't understand, to be able to speak up for themselves. But I think what Paul is saying is really true and very important. I think as a whole, we need to put in place a system that works, so that if Dan Pope screams at my kid, and Dan Pope has never screamed at one of my children, screamed at my kid, and my kid came home and said, Dan Pope yelled at me. First of all, I'd like to think that we as parents give the coach the benefit of the doubt, because sometimes my son will say, you yelled at me. Dude, I didn't even raise my voice. So I always think, define your terms, like, what do you mean by bit your head off? Because God knows I've had coaches that have yelled at me, I'm not dead. I mean, you get over it, that happens. But we shouldn't be the first stop. We're the board, I mean, this sounds bratty, but like, we're the Board of Education. There should be a system in place where if you don't feel comfortable speaking to the JV coach, talk to the varsity coach. If you don't feel comfortable talking to the varsity coach, talk to the athletic director. If you don't feel comfortable talking to the athletic director, talk to the superintendent. But there needs to be a system that's in place that we can use, so that then those things can be investigated. But I also think that it should not go outside the relationship between the athlete and the coach, or the parent and the coach, unless the offense is egregious. That, you know, Dan Pope hit my kid over the head with a lacrosse stick, well then, we all need to get involved. But Dan Pope raised his voice to my son, then I'll have a conversation with the Dan Pope. You know, I mean, we have to have faith in our coaches.
That Hartford has for that,
Yes.
A card?
that has the
Oh, I
protocol.
thought you meant like, dear so-and-so, I'm really sorry to get your head.
Red card.
It's, we were just talking about it, it's on our code of conduct, but the
Yes.
first thing that came to my mind was actually our district calendar. On one of the pages near the end, there's a whole
Who
little
to
thing
call.
on protocol, who to go to. So, yes,
On page 7.
okay, and there you go. And there is that chain that should really find people out of it. I mean, if they find, if you have a problem with a modified coach, you should be going to, let's say hypothetically it's a cross, you go to the varsity coach. If that doesn't work, then the principal, or whatever the, right, Kevin?
Yeah, there is a chain, yeah. So
There is a chain of
when we
command.
get the calls, I try to
Right,
push them
document
back,
it.
who did you talk to?
Right.
That's who you need to talk to next.
And it's in the district calendar as well.
I was
It's
gonna
on
ask,
to a page.
is that what happened?
So this
That's
is-
what I do, yeah.
So this is the,
Unless it's that you hit somebody with a stick, then.
Right.
But I think also important to this is creating some guidelines as to what creates a basis for discussion. Because if you could eliminate 75% or greater of the discussions before they even occur, you'd probably be doing the coaches a great favor. And I can certainly see Dan's point that it seems to have gotten worse and worse over the years.
Societally.
I coached hockey for 20 years, and the last 5 were absolutely horrible, because parents just feel so enabled to discuss every aspect of what goes on via email and via now texting and what have you. So I think you have to be very clear about what creates a basis for discussion.
and what would you say as a place to start?
Well, the place to start is, number one, playing time is not discussable, or your child's level of participation in game activities is not open to discussion. Unless you feel otherwise, but you do feel that that's something that should ever be discussed, or just
I mean,
not really?
You know, again, I think that's something needs to be discussed with a player. And we do that a lot. I mean, I think the thing that would be wrong is for a kid to sit the bench the whole year and not know why he's there. You know, I think that would be the quote-unquote crime of it all. You know, if I had a player from my team that sat there the whole year, didn't play a lot, you know, if ever, and didn't know why. You know, I think that would be the thing. If that, if that player said, I was never told, the coach never talked to me, or whatever, that would be something.
I think Dan's got a good
But,
point. It's a very proactive way of not making more of an issue out of what it needs to be. You tell the player, the student, you need to work on these skills, you need to improve in these areas. If you improve in these areas and you know,
Right.
you tell them where they're at, I think a lot of times it does see.
And is it not part of our mission, what we were just talking about, how can you develop socially, emotionally? and
Sure.
physically?
Well, that goes back to, I think, what Paul suggested, one of the first things today is you've got different sets for the three different levels. You know, when you've got your 20 kids that are making the varsity ice hockey team, you know, you probably are gonna be on the fourth line. You know, work hard, this is what you have to prove by the beginning of the year. But, and then, what is the basis of discussion, I think you always start with, hey, you talk to a coach if you feel your child's health or safety has been jeopardized by what has happened in practice, or maybe by something that's happened in the locker room. That's where you start. That's not something that you want the kid advocating for themselves, that there's been an abusive situation, or you've been treated inappropriately by somebody. It might be other players, you know, or they're picking on somebody, or, you know, had somebody in
A
the,
form of bullying.
yeah, somebody doing a swirly, or got them locked in the locker, or, you know,
Yeah.
that the parent has to talk to the coach about. That can't just be the child, I think that's where you start. What are some other types of, that can be part of the discussion? Or is that it?
Yeah, when you say less is more.
I gotta speak up, I got a problem with no playing time is not for discussion.
With a parent?
Yes, I do.
No playing time? You mean,
Well,
oh,
that's
That's what I said.
No, he was saying, no, that's not what he was saying, he was saying that if the kid didn't play and he never communicated to the kid why that kid wasn't playing, that would be wrong.
But how do you
Well,
enforce that the coaches are gonna do that?
And that
A
was
lot
what I
of
was
them
gonna say.
don't even.
And I think that
say
comes
anything.
down to that what we talked about earlier, which is about clear expectations for the coaches, and to make sure that they're communicated, and to make sure that that's what we are measuring at the end of every year.
So how do you evaluate it though? To make sure it's being done.
you have different situations. The modified level is not a problem.
Everybody's got to play.
Everybody's playing, no problem. JV level, you should be playing everybody at some point, because they're supposed to be getting prepared to play for varsity. Now, and again, that's where our guidelines have to come into play for the JV level teams, so that the coach should realize that winning every game isn't that important. So, if, let's say, and I'm gonna reply to basketball, if you have 18 season games, and every game's like 5, 6, 7, 8 points, you might have 2 kids never get in, because you're trying to win every game. Now, is that fair to those 2 kids on a JV level, never to get into a game, even though you've talked to them about improving their skills? Where I'm like, oh my God, if I put him in now, or put in her now, we're definitely gonna lose the game, we're 25 down with 2 to go, we might win the game if we don't put him in. I mean, now if you're on the varsity level, and, you know, there you're expected to win, I would say. You do whatever you can to win the game. And there you might have a kid who is a weaker skilled player, whatever, they may not get in situations unless you're in a game where you're up by 15, 20 points.
Yeah.
And that's more acceptable than for a kid on a JV team.
Mhm.
So even though I'm gonna discuss with the JV player why you have beginnings of games or what you need to improve, I think that child, that student, should be getting into games.
Well, how often
No.
is it that a kid never plays at all? I mean, and I'm legitimately asking a question.
So what's the point?
How often is it that a kid on a team never gets to play at all? Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, like, for us, I would say rarely. You know, if that.
But they probably play barely also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
So it's,
Yeah.
But I guess, and I don't, again, I don't
and
know
that's
the
why
answer to
I
this
just think
question
it's
is,
gotta come
it's,
down to, you might have to discuss it with the parent. Like to say no, are we saying no, never, not gonna discuss playing time? Never's a long
but
time.
I think you
But-
discuss it with the athlete.
Correct, and you can also discuss it with the parent sitting next to the athlete, so they both get the same message.
I don't have a problem with that, but I also think that's why we have an athletic director who can, the board articulates policies to the superintendent, who delegates them to the athletic director, who can make rounds, I would presume,
Yes.
that we've made room in the athletic director's schedule to make sure that the policies that are set by our board are being implemented on our athletic fields. You know, the thing I love about sport in terms of teaching is in school, everybody gets promoted. We're all gonna get promoted if we meet the minimum standard. And when they leave here, you're not gonna get promoted for the minimum standard. You may not get promoted if you meet the maximum standard, if the kid next to you is that much better than you, which is what sport teaches you. And sometimes that extra effort in the summer that's not required it pays off. And that's a good lesson to learn, because sometimes the extra course you took, or, you know, I mean, this is the way the world works out there, and we ought to be teaching our children that. Yeah, we have to advance them in the classroom, if they meet the standard. But our athletic field teaches them lessons about life. And I agree with you, but I also think one of the ways we can cut down on the need for the parent communication is if our policies, that's really why I was excited about this. Let's get articulated policies and then implement the process by which those get put into play on a regular basis across all three of our levels and all of our sports.
I agree with everything you
So
said.
I think on the flip side of that, Paul, is that we're getting people that are saying, you know, at Modified, well, they're frustrated they're on the B team. Playing,
That
but
goes
now it's
back
like, you know what I mean?
Ever
So
since there was an A.
well, that's what I mean, but that's what I'm saying though, so everybody's not happy because they're playing, you know what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, where does it stop, you know? Question on kid, you know, I remember like 5 years ago, kid played like one quarter, one game, 3 quarters the next game, and then but it wasn't like the Whitesboro game, you didn't play that much, so now it's like, why is he not playing? You know what I mean? Those things just get more and more, and it just takes more and more of your time to sit there
I
with
just
everybody,
don't,
you know.
if you're gonna see, I thought it was said, we're not discussing playing time.
I said that.
Fine, he said that.
I still agree with that.
I don't agree with that. I think there might be a time, and I don't care what age level that student's at, you may have to sit down with a student and a parent and say, I'm a coach, I'm expressing these concerns, this is why you're not playing. Okay, I told you, now the discussion's over. I'm not saying do it for every instance, but there may be instances where you do have to do it.
Well, I think you're trying to make a rule for the exception, as opposed to making a rule and acknowledging.
Well, if I don't talk to them, they're gonna go to my head coach, my athletic director, or my superintendent. And now I'm gonna be called in to talk to somebody about it.
But I think it also goes down, it's also
But if we're not gonna
coaching
talk
skill.
about
I
playing
think that
time,
if,
we're not gonna talk about it.
no, but if Dan
That's
has
the
an athlete
thing.
who's not getting enough playing time, and Dan has a conversation with that athlete, and that athlete still doesn't feel satisfied by that answer, enough to go back to his mother and say, you know, Coach Pope explained it to me, I understand. That's really about, I'm sorry to keep using you, Dan, but you're sitting there. That's really about Dan's coaching skills. It may not necessarily be about the parent or the kid, it might be about the ability, and it goes to, you know, not necessarily continuing education, if you will, in the specific sport, teaching Dan how to play better lacrosse. Maybe it's just about teaching them how to be better communicators. Because we could have some really fantastic coaches who maybe don't communicate effectively.
And it also has to go back to the student and the parent, as Mr. Rail said, this is life.
Yep.
This is the way it is. But I think at times you may have to, and I just don't like saying, we're not discussing it, ever. That's
We'll
bothers
leave
me.
the ever off.
Well,
But no, I understand what you're saying. But I still, I think we have to make an environment where, and, you know, as Jamie said, and I agree, doesn't matter what you coach, I coach little cheerleading, so how come my kid's not the flyer? Yeah, really, like, really, she's 6, but you know what, it is true, there's a lot, we have to make it, have to make it so that people want to be coaches. They don't want to be, you know, and that's part of it. I think that we do have to make it so that the communication takes place primarily between the athlete and their coach.
So maybe a compromise, that why can't it be discussed initially in detail, with a detailed process? I live my life by that, and that's correct. During the initial meetings, doing newsletters to all, that if you find your son or daughter doesn't have adequate or quality playing time, please understand, I will be meeting with them. I will be talking with them. We'll be working on skills in need of improvement, so that it's a compromise. We are discussing it. They are being made of that. At least they're being acknowledged and not just sitting on the end of the bench for the whole year but at the same time, it kind of deters from the individual calls, taking away quality time from our coaches. Just a suggestion.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it should be really up to the player to request that conversation with the coach. I don't think the coach can go to every kid who's not playing and say, you're not playing because of this, this, and this. If the kid knows that he's at the bottom end of the spectrum and is happy to be there and working hard and knowing that maybe next year he's gonna get his playing time, that's one thing. So, yeah, I don't think coaches necessarily would be expected to go down the line and explain to, on a regular basis, to each kid where he stood, but if the kid has a specific requirement, then it's up to them to advocate for themselves.
I think it's something, at least I would always tell them, if you ever wanna know, why you're not getting out there as much, what's going on, you come and ask me. You may not like the answer, but I'll be honest with you. And we'll talk about it.
And I agree, and I could see a junior or senior doing that, but working with 7th and 8th and 9th graders, we're helping them build their confidence towards that, and they may not feel comfortable to approach a coach and say that.
But I agree with Dan, I think that it's something I know I've always done that, and a lot of times that ends it, it doesn't go to the parent, or they tell the
Well,
parent.
you meet with the kid.
Right,
Right.
right, I think that's really important, it's time to, they gotta start being a little more independent, and I think that, now, if a parent isn't satisfied with the answer that the kid gives them, and the parent wants an explanation, then I'll give it to them. But I think that first, it's gotta go through the kid first, and then after that, if the parent's not satisfied, the parent comes to you. That's what, a lot of times the kid understands, they look to improve, and sometimes they'll earn more playing time because of that.
I think maybe as a compromise, I don't know how people feel about this or not, but, as to what's Paul talking about, is maybe you don't wanna, I never had that discussion with him via email or anything like that. I'll say, I won't talk about this for you, if you wanna come in and talk about it, I'll talk about it, so.
No,
I'm not
face to
gonna do
face.
that, so, but there are people who wanna discuss it with you then, so. Again, do we say that there, do we, I don't know.
Well, a recommendation I'd make to the coaches is, when you first select your team, give everybody an idea where they stand. You're probably a starter, you're probably a second line, and, you might get in, and this is the varsity, JV, that discussion too. And then practice determines who plays. As a manager, you say 1,000 times, practice determines who plays. What I'd like to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is kind of wrap this up and see where what we've done so far, just to see if we're ready to make any add to the recommendation.
I'd like to make one more point to that, and I don't know if it's true or not, maybe people can think about it, but I think possibly sometimes the reason we get more of it, or have been getting more of it lately, in the last few years about that is, you have a lot more people doing stuff outside of seasons, whether it's club teams or whether it's other stuff, so I think when people are involved for longer periods of time, like all year, maybe there's a greater expectation that they will play during the season. I don't know, but that's something maybe for everybody to think about, so I'm wondering sometimes whether people get, upset because their children aren't playing as much because, they've done stuff in the summer, or they've done stuff in the fall or the winter, and, do they feel that they should be, during the season when it's like the time when it counts? That's a possibility because people pay money for that stuff, they send them places, now again, just from a cursory look at it, you say, well, it doesn't mean, not the time you put in, it's what you put into the time, but, that might be a reason for that, I've thought about that, I don't know, so, what do you think about that, so.
I guess I'm gonna have to say that I think, I have coached, it's been quite a few years, but I think I always expected that a part of it was going to be making myself accessible to parents to answer their questions and concerns. And I'm not saying, that you should talk to the same person and repeat the same conversation for 45 minutes after every game, but I think it's, and I think it goes in part with what level you're at, but I think you have to expect that you should be accessible to parents, not to devote, an overwhelming amount of time to that, but I think that parents expect to be able to have a conversation, not to tell the coach what to do, but I think sometimes you just have to expect that you need to explain something, you need to answer a parent's question or concern, without having the same conversation over and over again.
One of the first professional development sessions that new teachers should have is how do you grade and how do you communicate this grading to parents? And maybe a professional development for coaches as well, in addition to the skills, is working with your constituents. What are some guidelines you have to,
Right, and certainly as a teacher, you expect to have communication with a parent if there's a question. So I think that there's some carryover there, and as far as the teaching philosophy, carrying over somewhat into the coaching philosophy.
let's see if we can summarize, and we're gonna need some help with this. First of all, in regards to recommendations, are we ready to say that we want to recommend to the board see if we can establish a way to strengthen the evaluation systems for coaches? Okay, good with that? What's that?
What's, gonna tell me the better strengthen evaluation system, we don't have an idea how to do it.
I think it has to do with the expectations.
We're suggesting to them, to us, the board,
Yes.
to strengthen the evaluation system, but this committee is not giving them a recommendation of how to do it.
I think we can, are we ready to try to do that?
Not tonight, but.
I don't think so, but maybe, and in here, you might wanna look at the evaluation tool
Okay.
that was in this
Well,
book.
there wasn't a period after that, right?
No, so
No,
we
I
would
left it.
recommend that, but more to come.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
okay, so to strengthen the evaluation system, so our homework is to, review the evaluation tool. Okay, next, we've got to, in regards to communication, in regards to the newsletters, the three items, see if, what we can do to strengthen those in regards to specific data that is gonna be included in the newsletters.
I think it was, what I took was that the newsletter was good, but it really got the website.
Okay.
They could have different missions.
Okay, so,
I think the newsletter
It
is
is
like,
what it
you
is, yes.
okay, so the website, a mechanism to keep it updated, with daily pertinent information. And I'm not sure how that can happen with the secretary of the athletics department, or somebody designated each one.
Well, some of it is, once you put the schedule in, you schedule it. It's not like and once the forms are uploaded, they're uploaded.
You just think.
They just stay there.
However,
Really-
where the problems with the athletic director, I think, are the daily things where all of a sudden something's changed, okay?
And that's generally the secretary. There's sort of,
There's a flood at a field in Whitesboro, and, or the game change, or whatever.
I was surprised to hear this earlier this year about, I used to do everything by paper, practices like this days. Nowadays, I heard that the junior high school team, or one team, the coach has emails for every kid, or texts for every kid. And they send it out. So if every coach has a mass email made up, already the address is made up, and they know the field at Whitesboro flooded, we're going over here, the coach or the assistant coach or someone on that team could email parents, because most people have smartphones nowadays, I'm not saying everybody's gonna get it, but it's a way of at least contacting somebody. I could call him, and say, gee, it's a message, I don't know if that's possible.
Is that a fair expectation to make?
It's kind of current practice. You do that with your team, or it's largely a current practice within the team itself.
Right.
Yeah,
Within the community.
but rather than clutter the website with
No,
that,
just the team.
it's really, I think, it does occur.
We have robocall capacity in the district, every robocall.
Yeah, but we don't roll it out for all that.
I'm just saying, you know, the capacity's there, so the idea of a text, it's Paul's idea, would be like,
It's not the text though, it's the creating all the emails and so on. So like right
the
now,
coach, the coach can do it.
no, I'm saying that we couldn't use the robocall system that the school uses.
Oh, no, I get that, but I'm just saying, certainly the
Yeah.
capacity's there to disseminate the information in an efficient manner.
The school is
Yeah.
flooded.
Oh, God.
The other thing that I have in my notes is that this committee
I'm sorry.
would like to have the mission and the vision articulated in all communications. Okay. And then that brings us to the preparing a template for the coaches' meetings,
Apparently.
parent meeting. I hate to say this, but we left some things up in the air, and maybe we should. Are they mandatory, or are they not? Well, I don't think we're ready to say that. Are we ready to say playing time, no playing time? I would, but this committee's not,
No.
and that's not involved. Okay? Okay. Do we have a process for eliminating committee members?
Give it a shot.
And then, the last thing is parent protocol, and I think we're just starting to look at that now, okay?
But it's already in existence.
I think
I'm sure it's on the code of conduct.
you have the numbers, but maybe, but everybody's numbers there are listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe if this, then that, or is that too?
You mean talking about the chain of command?
Yeah.
Just think the chain of command is the chain of command.
That's right.
And it's simplistic, but it says it in all of our communications.
We'll get that. Okay. And then, so our homework for next week is to look at the evaluation system.
When do you wanna talk about the different philosophies for modify the JV?
Okay.
Because I think that's really.
And then, we've got to, no, and then we haven't even talked about some guidelines and the thing that we had down for May 13th, I don't think we're quite ready to get to that.
Whole bottom part off.
Yeah.
Because actually, we've talked a lot about this at the board level, to be honest with you, the priorities for scheduling, facilities, et cetera.
Can you tell me what your last question was? When are we going to get to what?
When are we gonna get to the philosophies, we've discussed them.
The three philosophies.
Yes, for the different levels.
Okay. 3-level philosophies. Okay.
I think Paul does a pretty nice job of laying that out there.
Go right to the state or the section or the league and see what they're, doesn't the league have a such,
Does it?
I'm sure there's someplace about modified philosophy.
There absolutely is in the handbook. We can have that here too, so we have a handbook.
The template there,
Yeah.
modified. You just
Okay.
build on it for JV and build on it for
Right.
wrestling.
Okay, so
I think we all
C.
agree on varsity.
Okay. So for next week, we're going to do two things. Look at the, well, we're gonna do a number of things, but what we're going to review is the evaluation model, and then we also will start to come up with a recommendation that we emphasize 3 levels of missions in addition, categories for the mission statement. Okay?
Mr. Hunt's the 13th, correct? 2 weeks.
Yes, Monday, May 13th, 5 o'clock. Is that what we said next week?
Just make a shot.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else for the, thank you very much.
Mr. Hunt, any other period of residence,
Thank you.
See what I'm saying?